We're here every Thursday.
Okay, so we said we were going to experiment. We're putting it into practice during Silverchair Strategies. So here we are. Ask us questions on any topic. Although you might want to make it relevant somewhat to the rest of the folks in the room. So. Okay, David is going to kick us off here.
At the beginning, Thane mentioned Silverchair's participation in the RA21 project. Can you maybe, I haven't heard anything much about RA21 for a few months. Can you give us a sort of an overview of how Silverchair is involved, progress, where you see it going?
Where's Craig? Yeah, I mean, first of all, go tell him, nice job skipping the executive session.
He's drinking
and then
already.
Killer job having the first question directed towards your area of specialization not being in the room. I'm feeling that is good for saving 20% of his salary next year.
Well, David, to get a start while we're gathering Craig. So the RA21 has got 3 pilots running right now. There is the full cloud WAYF or WAYF. That's the one that we are participating in. And so that actually has its own meetings and trajectory. And then the other 2, which I'm not as familiar with because we chose not to do them.
I think one of them actually got eliminated anyways.
Okay, well,
But now we have the expert in the room. So this is Craig Griffin, solutions engineer, who apparently thought he could just go to the bar early towards our Q&A. Busted.
I was actually working with Phil on his questions for this strategy.
Thank
so
you very much.
We're all,
the
we're all set
question
now.
was, what's the status of RA21? What's our involvement with RA21? And what do you see coming up on the
Sure,
on the
absolutely. So, so the origins of RA21 and similar initiatives go back to about a year and a half ago, and there was a lot of talk about Sci-Hub and piracy. There was a lot of questions about security, and there was a sort of an emergence of multiple tracks of sort of next generation access. How are we going to deal with this? We're in a world of IP authentication, which I was just talking to Phil about. It is, as Stuart said, a completely broken access method. It's very insecure. It doesn't protect our content. It doesn't give us what we need. So how do we replace that? Well, no one publisher is going to go and suddenly lock down their site such that it's much different to access. So the idea was to have an industry-wide initiative around improving access methods, both for publishers, but also there's benefits for the users. You know, if you see some of the talks that Roger Schoenfeld's done about access from the institution side, from the library side, about how convoluted those access methods are and those kinds of things. So the goal here was really to have an umbrella that sits on top of the industry that is a sort of a normalized experience across all platforms and all institutions. And the idea was to bring together publishers and technologists and even institutions into that mix. And there was a series of meetings in various places in DC and London over the last year and a half or so, and sort of working groups formed out of those meetings that kind of boiled down to 4 different access methods as prototypes. So the group wanted to sort of explore different options about different ways that this problem could be solved. And then we kind of broke up into groups to sort of dive more deeply into those particular access methods, solutions that we could apply, and then test those initially on our own systems, then roll out pilots and that kind of thing. So what we've done now is gone through sort of the review of those 4 systems, and then Silverchair is part of working through one of those particular pilots right now, where Wes and Jake are working through about how that would work on the platform and be able to evaluate that, report back to that group, and then be able to be part of the selection process for the overall solution that will be recommended.
And David, so they've actually created an interface for review. So I don't know if you've seen this yet, but we've seen the draft interface flow that has been put together. There was a group that was tasked with designing what the end user flows could look like, and they put out about 2 or 3 different options basically via a series of PowerPoint threaded. They're basically saying, well, we could do it this way, where they go into the institution. So I'd be happy to share those with you and with everyone here.
You can also go to the RA21 website, and they've got recordings of a lot of the meetings that they've had, the online conferences that they've had that we've been attending. They have downloads of the presentations and some meeting notes. So a lot of that's available in the download area for you to review. And so they do have some screenshots of what they're thinking from a user experience perspective. They definitely have the sequence diagrams of how the flows and integrations would work. And so they're moving into a proof of concept phase now, where they actually start from kind of an architecture, maybe even a code level, trying to see how it would work in reality as opposed to just on paper.
I get is just the idea of a timeline of, do you have any sense of when we would actually start to see these improvements or these systems coming online and starting to be used broadly?
Well, so this will be an optional approach. Like Craig said, it is, the reason they're doing it at the industry-wide level is, number one, no one wants to take this leap by themselves and completely change their system, while everyone else stays the same and they become the outlier. They become the last slide in Roger Schoenfeld's piece. So right now, someone's going to have to go first, and I know that there are pilots that are on the Adapon platform, and there's some clients who've decided that I don't know what their access looks like, but it must be to the point where they want to change it and they want to try out this new method first. We're currently doing technical consulting with it, but we don't have an active customer of the Silverchair platform signed up to implement that interface and that workflow as part of this first round, and that's supposed to be completed this year. So that first pilot is supposed to be up and live to the world this year. So that was what I heard in the last phone call, was that by December there was going to be a live version of the screenshots that we saw. And it was likely going to be a customer on the Adapon platform. Is that correct?
I didn't catch the Adapon part, but yes, they would have something to demo at the end of the day.
And Todd has more.
Todd Carpenter, the Executive Director of NISO, just want to throw in a little bit more color in there. This is a joint project between NISO and the International STM Association. The other pilot is, rather than focusing on a cloud-based solution, is looking at a client-based solution to help the user navigate the where are you from and glean information from the browser in order to navigate the user towards their identity provider and help them navigate that access control system. Similarly, that project is also trying to get a pilot together by year end. Wiley, Elsevier, and ACS are leading that pilot development. They're on a similar path, using something called SAML bits, which is based out of an identity provider in Europe. The goal is, once those pilots are in place, do some usability or user testing with 6 different library institutions on this system, get it in the hands of actual users, see what their problems are, and see if it functions for the user, and then move towards a NISO recommendation towards the middle part or later towards the end of next year. So that's where our goal is, to move that towards a formal recommendation and something that can be implemented next year.
And just to be clear, so we haven't planned to be rolling out live our early RA21 prototypes on the Silverchair platform. We haven't had a partner of ours, such as you all in this room, who want to be that first person on there. But we will absolutely be consulting with it and putting our input into this. And then as soon as that standard reaches those stages that Todd just mentioned, we will likely be recommending it to many of you, that it would be worthwhile to to adopt. But yes, we're not going to be right on the forefront of the putting it into practice this year. Okay, Patrick has a question. Patrick, you realize you work for us.
Need to upgrade the training program.
So this fits in with the sort of scalability theme we've been talking about. So as the Silverchair universe expands and we add more and more features and partner functionality, it seems like it becomes less practical to rely on human testers, at least for regression tests. And so I'm curious if we have plans to sort of expand our automated testing suite on top of what we already have.
Great. Stuart?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So to date, where we've focused our automation efforts are around areas of high algorithmic complexity. We're essentially saying, where's our application got a lot of kind of tangled logic branches in isolation, and that's where you get a lot of real bang for your buck around automated testing at a lower level. Recently, we've just started an initiative to essentially automate testing at the higher level, essentially browser automation. And we've started, first of all, with OUP, essentially working down to get the highest use cases there that essentially, what are the most important things that we want to make sure work on every release. And there's an effort underway to broaden that to other clients. So that's going to be ongoing.
So for that, we use a tool called Ghost Inspector.
Yes.
I remember that because that sounds cool.
Isn't that a rapper?
But with Ghost Inspector, we could certainly write an automated test for each of the widgets as we integrated partners, so that every time we did a release or they did a release, we could quickly run those tests and make sure that we're seeing the outcome out of that widget that we wanted to. Setting up Ghost Inspector scripts, I think we have hundreds of them at this point. Mm-hmm. You basically write a new suite for a group of functionality, and then you can just set it, you can set it loose for months, if not years, to continually run, and you'll get a major flag if something doesn't work in Ghost Inspector. It'll turn red, and you'll have to go in before you actually push that release to production.
Philip, I see you have a mic.
Hi, Phil DiVietro, ASME. This is a little more blue sky, and I keep thinking that the way the internet was originally conceived and designed, there was no security at all. And now we're in a world where we're paying the price for that all over the place. I can tell you that we've had some defense contractors, aerospace type companies that are customers of ours, and we've had to work out other arrangements because they won't use IP recognition anymore because of the security risks. So I keep thinking that whole infrastructure maybe has to change, or there's going to be a big hiccup because we keep patching it. And every day there's something in the newspaper. Equifax was the recent one. There's the SEC, on and on and on and on. A year or two ago, one of the newspapers said, if there's two types of companies in the U.S., those who have been hacked by the Chinese and those that do not know they've been hacked by the Chinese. So I can go on and on and on, but what do you in terms of blue skying it a little bit, should the whole thing be scrapped and rebuilt, or what could be done there?
I think it should be, but I fundamentally believe there's too much built on it, and it's probably going to be an evolutionary process. And we're seeing that as pressure comes on various components, they are revving versions of those and kind of tightening them up. But I would hazard a guess that we're likely to see the same kind of infrastructure, and we just essentially have to keep band-aiding the system.
One thing that I would throw out there is that 15 years ago, I would say, well, why can't we make every single person authenticate individually, robustly? And the concept was, well, no, first of all, librarians don't want that folks to have to identify themselves individually because they're not the direct purchasers, and they want to protect their privacy. And then second, that whole process of trying to remember 1,000 passwords and usernames for every single journal you went to is pretty unfeasible. And in my presentation, I talked about walking our way up the value chain. I could see if you created a new suite of products that is more of a derived data product, you could start it with a much more robust security system. Trying to retroactively apply it to the basic literature, the books and journals, is going to be hard because you're going to have to balance against the usability and access piece. But if you created a new product that no one is using right now, no one has expectations of how easy it should be to log into this major analysis platform, then I would start at a much higher level of, I would not be selling site licenses to that project. So potentially we might have another shot at this as we moved up the value chain with your new potential class of products. But it's going to be really hard to kind of retroactively apply it back down to that kind of remember layer, yeah.
And I'll qualify what I said earlier. I was probably thinking a little more broadly in terms of security in general and all the different components there that have vulnerabilities. I do think Jake's right. When it comes to individual authentication, I think there is an opportunity there, and I think it's really going to take industry efforts to be able to stamp out things like IP authentication. And that is possible because there's nothing fundamentally necessary about something like IP authentication.
Great. Allison, is the mic coming your way?
I'm curious about staffing trends, where needs are emerging, if you see growing in the next year, and if so, where, or if you see shrinking, and if so, where?
Staffing is obviously something that we're concerned about, and you see in just some of the trends that Paige showed that for us it's a little lumpy, and so how do we plan for those? Our current staffing allows us to move to where we see different client demands. I think we had a question about, well, how many PDM, like how many clients does a PDM work with, and how do we manage that? So we have a scalable structure in our organization on how we can add staffing and resources into teams to be able to kind of follow the work. That's one of the best things about having a platform is that it's fairly, we're able to move resources around and staffing around to be able to solve those needs. Currently, and Thane, you may want to join more on kind of the long-term organizational structure, but we're staying within Charlottesville and having those teams be there.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, you got different things at work. We think there are very likely a lot of opportunities that are going to appear in the next couple of years just due to the industry restructuring itself and certain changes that have happened, so externalities from us. And so we have to be very thoughtful about how we take on those opportunities and how we staff for those opportunities. You build as much of a structure as you can, but at the very end of the day, there's no perfect replacement for experience. There's no perfect system that can get everybody, especially in something as complex as the sort of customization ecosystem of this. So we'll have to be measured about what we take on. I do think we suffer from lack of labor cost arbitrage, and if we could find ways, we still, honestly, not quite big and not quite scaled enough ourselves to do that effectively. If we could find ways to do that effectively in the future, we would certainly consider it because we think it puts pressure on our pricing, on our costs that we have to pass to all of you, and certainly is a challenge. So, I am always seeking more productivity. So I'd rather keep the same staff and do twice as much work, but my staff doesn't always agree with me on that. But to the degree that we can keep using software and using process to create more productivity, we're creating scale that way. But I think it's a multi-pronged approach. One is being thoughtful, accurate, having the right metrics and KPIs, deciding what you're going to bite off, being thoughtful about your recruiting and training process to grow at a measured pace where you're not going to affect quality and reliability. Look for solutions that could give us modular expansion opportunities and cost arbitrage in those outside sources. So it's kind of a combination of all of those things. I do expect growth. I mean, I think we see in the environment lots of opportunities, and not just in the immediate direct competitor world, but we're scratching the surface of professional information management, and it's an endless sea of opportunity. So we're just going to try to do that carefully, but we are going to try to grow. So.
But it doesn't sound like there's any one area that you've got your eye on that you say, we want to build this up in the next 12 to 18 months.
Well, Wes and I are definitely, from the growth that we've had and having folks join us, we definitely have been growing on the product side pretty aggressively, and with more planned for next year as well. The thing is, we're kind of the beneficiaries of that outcome of scale. As we bring more customers on, more money flows to Wes and I to build more teams to do more on the product side. So that's an area that we're definitely intentionally growing. And like Thane said, we're even doing some things to manage our organizations and have some separate management lines so that we can make sure that those resources that are going towards product are 100% committed to that shared product code. And so that's really been a boon for us as far as what we can accomplish together. Yes, Jerry? Oh, sorry, one more ahead. I think it's, you got the mic? Yeah.
I got the mic. Yeah, I wanted to follow up on something Thane just said about scratching the surface of professional, and then earlier I think it was Stuart showed a slide that had kind of your base platform and then custom applications being the smaller side. I guess my question is, if the rest of the clients in the room here are like my folks, they're sort of constantly pushing the base platform with kind of bespoke applications or pushing into newer things. Can you walk through the thought process of like when you kind of get a groundswell of enough of those things that you decide, okay, that's going to become part of the base platform? When is there enough demand for whatever it is, assessment, analytics, things that aren't really considered right now sort of part of delivering on a unified platform? When does that become something that does become part of the platform?
Talk about the sort of how you've evolved the sort of platform steering process and how what those inputs are, and then Stuart may or may not have a follow-up. I mean, there's an abstraction question there as well, right? So what are the things that we can fully abstract and are really utterly divorced from whatever the user outcome, the functional outcome, the interface outcome is, versus which things have a little more particularity. But maybe you should start with the process first.
Sure, yeah. So Scott, one of the things that Stuart showed was that the flexibility and the weight of a platform project, it just by its nature is a longer, heavier process. So we have to build it into the core code that's going to be flowing into every single person's production deployment. So it has to go through all the rounds of testing and making sure it doesn't interact with any existing code in any sort of negative way while providing the value we expect. And so using the custom layer to start, especially on items that might be local to one organization or just one or two, really gives us an accelerator to get that into the market so we can see, so we can get more feedback on it. A lot of product development is speculative. So you have a concept, you think you have a great idea, you do some initial discussions with folks, but you don't really know until it's out there. And so the custom layer gives us a chance to get it out there even quicker. And it certainly gives the advantage to the person who's really committed to it and getting it out there before anyone else as well. But for items that are either no-brainers that they apply to everybody, so I mean, of course, everything in the layers around security and accessibility, these are common problems. It's a no-brainer that those should be approached in that way. We'll start with the platform approach. And for the others, we have a platform steering committee that has a process that it has two major inputs. The first input is major projects and research projects that are going on at Silverchair, which produce a set of pitches, which then get assessed by the team as far as their applicability among all of our customers, and they also get sized for complexity and impact. And the other input is we have a feature group that is comprised of the PDMs and others who bring in customer requests and customer ideas on what they are looking at and what they see as an opportunity for us. And those actually flow into the funnel as well on the front. And for those, we kind of we make a decision is this worth bringing into the platform and doing the full pitch right off the bat, or should we wait and implement it and see how it works? And so some of them go right into the platform funnel, in which case they might take a little longer to roll out, but they will roll out to everyone. The other ones will go right into the client enhancement, get rolled out, and then we can make a decision, likely probably on the next request, or if we see that working really well, we might consider making it broad. But that's the decision process. I can't say that we have it is a case-by-case decision process. So the team is weighing it against the other items that are in that platform steering queue. And we're also, as we gathered more evidence, it might make it a more compelling case. So something might get queued lower, and then it gets out in the wild, so to speak, as part of a customization, and it's just the most successful thing ever. And then it would get bumped up in that queue as far as bringing it into the platform.
I think one point, just to reiterate, because the way you said it, I want to make sure everybody that it landed. If a publisher comes to us and says, I want to do X, and this is what I want the interface experience to be, and the cost of that is Y, to do that in one customization silo for one customer. The cost of doing Y at the platform level, regressing it across all applications and making sure that it works, can be 3 to 5 times Y. And so that's the basic, the sort of speed and cost thing on the first part. And then in some case, it is kind of case by case. Somebody will say, we have an idea, we'll fund part of it, you fund part of it. Split screen's a great example of that. Java wanted to put split screen in place. They did a bunch of user research with a bunch of mock-ups, pre-production. We said, we think this is a winner. The research was a winner. They wanted to advance it quickly. So we made an agreement where we split some cost on that. They launched it first in the one silo, and then we were able to take the time to develop it, regress it for all the other clients to follow 6 to 12 months later. So that's an example of that. So each case is a little different. The other piece is that there's just different layers of abstraction in all these decisions, and maybe you could speak to that a little bit about how you decide what's going to really exist in the core and what's really going to be a silo item.
Yeah, from an engineering perspective, it's really about us thinking about the implications to the long-term cost of ownership. There are certain things, and from an engineering perspective, and I sometimes get flack for this, but we as engineers, we have a purity mindset. We want things to be elegant, we want things to be kind of future-oriented, and so we're really weighing into the conversation to try and help inform what the underlying trade-offs are.
Hopefully that's helpful. But bottom line, Lisa is a great conduit for, obviously, as you all know, for things that, or any of the PDMs, for ideas that you have. That's a big, important part. And then internally patterning those in the PSC, patterning those and trying to find the ones that match where we know we should go platform right away.
Great. Jerry?
Jerry?
Hi, the European Union General Data Protection Regulation kicks in the end of May 2018. What impact, if any, do you see it having on publishers' digital library platforms, in particular, and in general publishers? Is it something that has been brought to you as a concern? Personally identifiable information in log files in the digital library platform? And have you responded to those?
Well, I know that we went through a very substantial evaluation of this problem when we were bringing OUP on, because that was our biggest, at that point, not that we don't have publishers publishing globally, but based in the UK. And I know that there's been a lot of shifting ground about what the acceptable ways to manage that, from the safe harbor approach to various later stages. My own sense, and if Bobby was here, who's our kind of contract meister, and David might know some of this, but my own sense is that there aren't going to be substantial changes to best practices that we're already following. There's some front-end stuff. Everybody sees this when you go to sites emanating out of the UK. You get that it's starting to leak over to here, but you see it over there where they have the much more evident information about their cookie policies that you have to click through and go onto those sites and those kinds of things. From a back-end perspective, best practices that should be in place are significantly compliant with that already. Part of it is about where you house the data, and there's still some legal differences about whether you're allowed to move that data around geographically, and there may have to be some practice changes to that. But I think even though that policy is going into effect, it's not fully legally tested yet, is my sense. And so you're going to get some outlier test case where some guy says, you know, I hate Facebook and I live in Holland and I'm going to have a court case, and off it goes, and then we'll all have to change practices. So I think it's going to have to be tested after that implementation date. I don't know if anybody else who knows more about this, since I was standing in for Bobby, would like to comment on that. Feel free.
Staring at you OUP folks over there. I know some of this is front of mind. Oh, good.
Particularly being a British company, obviously we're taking GDPR serious. There is a lot of ambiguity in the way the law is written. So we're taking legal guidance on about 100 different use cases to try to get a sense of what we can and can't do. But Thane, I think broadly you're right. It's going to change how you ask for consent. So there'll be some front-end changes to marketing practices. I think there's some gray areas around user profiling and those type of technologies, whether or not you will or will not need to ask for consent, what is and is not truly anonymized, those type of things we're still working through. I think most of the changes are going to be on the front end and on the marketing and sort of even sales interaction side. Some questions about advertising. Google and the IAB are convinced that what they do is fully GDPR compliant. So there's still a fair amount of ambiguity, to be candid, but definitely a lot of front end changes to get consent when you need it. I don't know if that was helpful.
Yes, was.
But theoretically, they could tell us, I'm not allowed to show you related articles.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, in theory. Yeah. Whether they're actually going to come bring a case, is there going to be a guy that comes and says, hey, you showed me an article that I know is exactly targeted at me, so I'm suing you. I don't know.
It's going to come down to whether it's necessary, right? And that's where the ambiguity is. I think you could argue a related article is necessary on a platform, even if you've used some sort of anonymized user data.
Yeah, right.
If you're using that same technology to merchandise them a book that's on sale, maybe less so, because that seems more overtly marketing. And so that's what I mean by we're looking at it from a nuanced use case standpoint, and happy to share those use cases if it's useful, because that's how our legal team wants us to approach it.
You know, but given our approach for non-authenticated users, which is machine ID, as long as we make sure we're not actually making the linkage to an actual user profile, I can show machine ID ads all day long, right? I mean, that's not my, theoretically, as long as I don't have that link to the person in some other part of my system, right?
As long as you can't cobble it together in some way.
Right.
And again, there's ambiguity about whether or not some of the algorithms that some companies use can do that and cannot.
Yeah.
People feel that they do is truly anonymous. And so this is the kind of stuff we'll have to look at.
Yeah. I think there's,
Less and less worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of furrows to be plowed, and my guess would be that the first handful of legal cases that are testing it are not going to be in scholarly. I might be wrong, but, you know, that's,
Yeah, and that's our chief legal counsel has similar.
yeah.
Great, thank you.
Did Mark? I'm sorry. I saw you raise your hand before, but I don't know if you actually, oh, you were stretching, okay. You were reaching behind you to see if there was a bar behind that black.
Got the black.
Bart Hickey from SCORE, longtime listener, first-time caller. Just the first comment, I think a fake potted plant behind you would complete the sort of community television access panel thing. Just a comment there.
Nice, that's nice.
More importantly, we are on the custom platform 5.5. Are we part of the Silverchair universe?
So if it's going to be something that we're going to have to look at, there's going to be some of the partners that are more back end than front end. It depends on the stack. That's really the answer, right? So if it's a widget that we're able to port over to your front end, and it's really just a front end kind of HTML, JavaScript thing, then absolutely, why not? If it's something that is, say, a partner being able to come in like Meta, and coming in and indexing your site, which is very similar to what Google Scholar does, then absolutely. If it's sending files, so maybe counter usage files or things like that, then we should be able to do that type of thing as well. I think where it would be complicated is where you start to go into that middle layer in between the database and the front end, and you have more complex integrations there, that part we'd have to figure out.
Like an authoring tool.
Like an authoring tool, yeah. So,
Yeah, or community tools like a Zapnito where you've got a single sign-on.
yeah, so Zapnito has single sign-on. So we'd have to look and see where the connection points are. And I mean, really for any client, we should look at the connection points and identify those up front, so.
Yeah, but we can, who's the PDM, sorry, who scores PDM? Lisa. So we can go through and actually quickly look out of the first batch. These are the ones that are easy and automatic, and these are the ones that are going to be a little trickier, and have a separate discussion about that.
Thanks.
And I mean, to add to that, as we have formal agreements put in place with each of the partners, part of the discussion there is what are the integration points. So that becomes identified from a technical perspective. And so then I can at the same time have our architecture group say, all right, well, looking at the existing list of clients, here's the one that makes sense and the ones that would be more difficult to do. And so I'll be able to share that with each of the PDMs so they can proactively have the information available for you. So.
Great. Question.
Matt?
This is pretty broad and open-ended, but what do you feel is the most underused or underappreciated piece of the Silverchair platform?
Wow. That's a tough one. If I could describe myself as an animal. Oh, wait, sorry, what was it?
Well, let's look at that another way. I think for years we've felt like there's been this notion that we could use, first it was XML, and then it was really semantic XML and other structures in the database to create lots and lots and lots of different products. The classic slice and dice, right? Those of us who've been going to publishing conferences have been hearing about slice and dice for 15 years, right? But it's still been quite difficult to do. We do have many products that are in a sense, slice and diced. So if you look at, Access, for example, we use a lot of content out of the database in a lot of different ways, and they populate different products, and it's not a one-to-one relationship. I think that what we realized was it's still kind of too expensive to effectively, you heard me talking about experimentation. So if you wanted to say, I've got 30 different special interest groups inside my society with these sort of subsidiary designations of interest. And what I like to do is to try out setting up 30 content packages and 30 subscriptions or whatever. Like, yeah, we could do that, but it took a pretty reasonably heavy lift. With today's tool set, and really it's just been maturing over the last 6 to 12 months, literally non-technical people on your end can go in there, set that whole thing up, identify the content, create the interfaces, create the products, the subscription models, and start pushing them out. Now, that's relatively new. And I know a number of our customers have pretty ambitious plans. I mean, another way, you could create 1,000 special, you could take the JAMA network or the Access collection, and you could create 10,000 sites, right? You could pick a really super granular topic and say, I'm going to collect all this, and go sell it to special sales. Or go just put it out there as an SEO tool. I mean, there's a lot of different things you could do. So I guess my large answer would be, while we've had the right substrate to do this kind of product experimentation that's going to drive a lot of different things, we haven't necessarily had a way to inexpensively close the loop all the way out to execution. And I think only now are we really getting there tool-wise. So I'm very enthusiastic about everybody having opportunities to do more of this very low-friction experimentation. That's my answer. What's yours?
Well, mine is that the area that
the rotating GIFs, animated GIFs, is that the biggest part that you feel is underused?
We need more of those. No, we have the ability to do personalized publishing, personalized approaches to what people see when they come to the site, and we're still seeing a lot of editorial objects being the lead of the site. So in other words, we see a lot more, here's what we just published lists than here's what is new and interesting for you lists. And we have the full ability on the platform to prioritize the latter and generate really interesting and useful information. In fact, I was showing JAMA during lunch, and it was with someone's phone who hadn't logged into JAMA or hadn't even gone to the JAMA platform on your phone before. And so I went, and I was like, here, I'm going to show you the personalized widget on a homepage. It wasn't there, and then I generated some traffic by going to a few things, and then it appeared on that homepage and said, well, here's the next things you should read. Now, it appeared below all of the editorial, well, here's what we're highlighting, and here's what we just published. But for me, after clicking around, the articles at the very bottom of that page were the ones that were the most interesting to me, not the featured articles that editorial wanted to feature or the latest published articles. So there's been so many publishing platforms, I mean, Facebook and others, who don't have the same product for every single user. It's very personalized to what you've been doing and what they can profile you for. We have that ability on the platform. It's very underutilized. We're still very much stuck in the editorial decision. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but if you ask me what's underutilized, you could have entire products and homepages and experiences that are built all around the user rather than the editorial structure.
But I mean, I fully agree with you. I think that's right. I do think, for people in the room who are editors, and you can and just thinking about product management, like it could be sort of destabilizing if there was no TOC of Annals of Internal Medicine or JAMA. You just went there and it was whatever it was, but I mean, there's just something very kind of philosophically destabilizing about that, right? And I get your point. The product of Facebook is Facebook. It's not the content that's appearing in your feed, but there's a big brand question and a big, and is there a value to the editorial decisions there? And so how do we integrate both of those things? When you're trying to drive engagement, our presumption is you can monetize engagement, but engagement's kind of a two-way street. I mean, there's yes, what's appropriate to you, but there's also, I mean, don't you ever, I mean, sometimes, like when you go to the Billboard charts, you want to know what the top 10 is, not your top 10. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, this could be a derived product on top, one of these derived data products on top of the base layer.
So I'm not arguing. I'm just saying it's a complex issue.
But that could be next. Much more personalization. Personalization into the feeds that you get. I was talking to someone that sends out a daily email, and they're worried about email fatigue, and they want it to be more targeted. And so, you could have much more use of personalization in some of those areas as well. We're going to send out the Silverchair newsletter on a daily basis. I don't know if you guys caught that.
Stephanie just did this too.
I think there was a question in the back.
Good afternoon. So one of the things that's really important to us isn't as visible as some of the other things they've been showing. We work a lot with the data on the back end. Data is very important to our stakeholders, our authors, our institutions. It's something I look at on a daily basis. I know we're going to be moving to Counter 5 in the near future, and that's something that's going to come into play. I've heard some different things about different ways people are using data. I know we've talked with another journal here that's using data in different ways. What do you guys see as the future in terms of using the data, how it should be used? Any cool case studies or things that people are currently doing to assist their authors and editors or work with their institutions in terms of showing them how they're using the content?
I might need some PDM assistance on this one.
Well, I mean, you should talk about how, you should talk about a few different things. But you talked about TDM. You've talked about recommendations. You should probably talk about other dimensions of analytics for marketing and things like editorial dashboards. I mean, some of those things we've done with affinities.
Wes and I have a pretty particular philosophy on data, and it's useful in two forms. That we think it's most useful in two forms. One is raw. In other words, getting you all of the data that you can possibly get in a feed like an Azure cloud feed so that you have the full flexibility. You're getting all the data and you have the full flexibility. Of course, with schemas and descriptions of what it is. I mean, we're not going to leave it that raw. And give you full flexibility to build the features that you want and the views that you want into that. And some of our customers want that data in raw format. The The other side that's going to be very useful are very particular views that are fully worked up. So that are basically views that are algorithms that are rigid in that they're going to deliver you the same thing every time, and you deliver a series of those reports that come out. I think where we've kind of lost our not interest in, but we've lost, we've realized has not been as effective is when you create something that's right in the middle, where it's kind of raw data, it's somewhat processed, but it's not into any sort of finished product. And that is, in many ways, that's where our Silvermine platform lives. It's half processed data, and it gives you some options to build your own reports. It hasn't had the type of uptake that we were hoping for among all of you. And so what we're really looking for is moving to those two edges. And so Stuart has been architecting the flows of the raw data into our customers, so getting folks hooked into those Azure data lakes. And then Wes and I definitely have the responsibility to come up with very particular views into the data that would be more of a packaged views into the data. And so, I mean, we have some of those built into the back of the reports, including things like institutional affinities of topics and things like that. But that's an area where I think we're going to continually add, but very particular items. Very particular views. And we're going to kind of move away from the middle of the kind of half-processed data on that end. So we'll see which way our customers want to go. If you're someone who would prefer, we have some customers that would prefer to have the finished reports and say, hey, listen, I want these particular data points, and I want this particular visualization. I want to be able to manipulate it in this way. That would be a finished report that I think we would work with you and others on. Yes? Well, I'm sure there's definitely some data that's not in Silverchair. Not all the usage data is in there. Yeah. But you know, we're collecting data from the web front end. We're collecting it from behavioral. But certainly all of the counter and all the usage data is in Silverchair.
Yeah, but like, do the affinities live there, or they live somewhere else?
No, the calculated affinities don't live in Silverchair.
Right, so that's an example. Yeah. So affinities meaning we match your usage, but then the click path and the semantics, and then that's where we get a much more topical profile. But those have to be joined, and that's what he's sort of saying. Like, we can either give you the flour, or we can give you the chocolate chip cookie, but we don't want to give you a lump of sticky dough. Yeah, but you have users who are not necessarily subscribers. I mean, you have people coming out of locations that are not, coming to your free articles, coming to your articles that are, post-embargo or whatever they are.
So it's a typical star schema, and the dimensions are shared. But the actual
you're going to have to explain that, Stuart, in English.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, within a data warehouse, you've typically got two things. You've got your dimensions and then your facts. And your dimensions are the ways you want to be able to slice in, and then your facts are essentially the things you're counting.
So you might have geographic dimensions, like all of the countries of the world, or all of the known research institutions of the world, and those are dimensions. But the facts will be your actual data as it interacts with those, right?
Yeah. And the facts themselves are essentially highly compartmented, so you're not going to be able to see others' facts, but you will have essentially the collective dimensions.
Which include might be, like, someone's IP, but we wouldn't be able to see the
Right, you're right, on any other product, correct. Well, I know that was a bit of an unsatisfying answer, and we've been thinking about this very hard, and we've been talking to organizations, and what we've realized is that it is truly, we want to do both. We don't want to just do the middle, because the middle is actually the worst place to be. We want to give you all the raw data we can in the most usable format. Some of you are hiring data scientists, please do. You're hiring folks to analyze your statistics. You're combining it with other statistics inside your organization. And that's really something that I think you're all going to want to have staff members' capabilities on. Then at the same point, there's very, very particular reports to publishing that can assist you that we want to deliver as well.
I talked to Wes about this a bit on the break, but I thought it would be good to talk in front of the group about this. We've been getting a lot of institutional requests about accessibility templates and statements. They've been very clear for now they are informational, but that in 2019, if minimum requirements aren't met, that they won't be able to subscribe to our products. So can you just speak a little bit about what we can do to make sure we are getting out in front of that?
Sure. So we have experience all the way to, I would say, one of the more extreme ends of that, which is our government sites have to go through multiple rounds of very rigorous accessibility auditing. But we don't apply all of those techniques to all of our sites. It's actually very heavy weight, and they have to do some things that are not very user.
You have to make a bunch of compromises in the interface, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then for our general sites, we are using, for most of our sites, we're subscribing to a little bit of a lower standard, the WCAG AA standard. So we have audit tools where we can run on each of the interfaces and prove or disprove whether they are compliant with those features. So there's definitely, we're keeping an eye on those accessibility standards as well. And what they really want is a clean audit report. Those librarians will require, not just a handshake and hey, everything's cool, but they will require a clean audit report. So we have the tools to do that. We run them on our sites. Not all of them give a clean green on those right now, but we'll definitely need to make sure they do before those dates really kick in hard.
And like I said to you on break, as you're getting that feedback, definitely share it with the PDM so that we can have some insight into which ones are coming up and how it may affect you. So.